Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's BDF44 coming at you with another video. So, just got to listen to a segment of Inside the NBA where Chuck and all the guys were sitting there and they were having a conversation about the Lakers and Russell Westbrook, and just really going over what they think about everything that's going on. And Chuck's whole point of view is that the Lakers are throwing Frank and Russell under the bus. It's not necessarily their fault that everything is falling apart. And it seems like to him, the Laker organization is making it seem like it is. My thing is, who are you listening to? Because I haven't heard anybody from the Laker organization do anything like that. I've heard fans in the chat or people like myself have been placing certain types of blame, but I haven't heard that from anybody within the organization. Now, have they been kind of playing it low and leaving Russell Westbrook to be out front and then Frank Vogel to be out front, and then having all this chatter about his job? Maybe they could have did more to kind of settle some of that. Yeah, I think they could have did a lot more to settle some of that. And from that perspective, I agree with Chuck. The Lakers organization do need to step out in front and say, yes, like I've been saying in this camera, we have multiple problems. It's not just injuries. It's not just the coach. It's not just Russell. It's not just the cap issue. We have a lot of problems with this. This roster was put together poorly. And the mistake is at the top. We don't know who's running things. That's the problem with the Laker organization, and that's why I agree with Chuck on that front too, because they're not allowing us to understand who exactly is responsible for this roster. We know that the GM is usually responsible for the team, but we also know that LeBron is usually responsible for the teams he's on, if not always. So at what point do we start asking who is in charge here? And that's what I've been doing over the last couple of videos. So some parts of what Chuck is saying, I agree with. But as far as them making a statement saying, yo, we are blaming these two, I don't necessarily see it that way. It's more so covert and them kind of hanging out in the background, not really stepping forward and saying, hey, look, we have some problems. We're going to fix them as an organization. So that's not necessarily something that's most important. All that I care about is that behind the scenes, they're doing what they need to do to make us better. And that's my whole point of view. I don't really care about chatter. I don't really care about who's talking about what. I don't, stuff like that makes for good conversation. I have a channel, so I speak on it. But the true news is the Lakers are lacking things on the floor that they need to try to get in order for them to compete best. And until they get those things, the coach that they have is just not the right coach for the roster. He was for 2020. No, not too many people disagree that he had a good roster for himself in 2020 when we won it, but that's not the roster we have right now, and that's that. So, I agree with Chuck in the sense that the Lakers need to step forward and let us know whose idea it was, to put together this roster and ultimately Russell Westbrook's contract, and I'm adding this to it, DeAndre Jordan's contract, picking up Trevor Ariza when we know we don't really have it left, picking up all these old guys that we know don't really have it left, and look, I tell you guys all the time I'm a fantasy basketball fan, so I know who's productive in the league and I know who's not. From year to year, I have a general understanding. I think I've spent less time this year doing it more than I have probably in the last 10 years, to be honest with you, and I'm still watching. So, I know who's been doing well. I know what guys' numbers genuinely look like, and when they no longer are productive is very obvious in the stat sheet. At this point, half of the team is not who they used to be and not really able to help you as much as you need them to. And so I'm of the mindset that the Los Angeles Lakers just need to scrap this whole old man idea and pull the Cleveland Cavaliers if possible and make moves if possible. If they're not possible, you know what you can do. And that's where the Frank Vogel comes in. Frank Vogel firing, rather, will come in. So it's not that I'm blaming Frank, and I'm sure you guys know that. It's that I place blame where it belongs, which is in a million different places right now. And most importantly, with the question mark of who's running things. So, as far as I can tell, it's probably Bron. Bron is the one who's doing all the talking and telling people what to do. And from what was reported this morning, according to Skip Bayless, which was not something I was really clear on, was that Russell Westbrook came to Bron and asked him if he could try to facilitate him coming to the Lakers. I wasn't aware of that. And if that's what happened, that changes things a bit, because he was trying to do his boy a solid. He knows the man's from LA. He knows he wants to come home. He knows he's had a rough batch. He knows the KD thing, and he knows he can help him win. and under the right circumstances. But the thing Brody needs to understand, and I'm sure he does, is that his contract really hampers the team. So whether you believe in yourself or not, you know what you can and cannot do. And at the end of the day, he's not going to be able to do enough. So if I'm Brody, I'm like, all right, yeah, I want to be a Laker, but let's come back when the contract is less ridiculous, when I'm at role player status, and try this thing again in like 3 years. Because right now you're just a little too expensive for what it is we're trying to build. It don't matter if you're playing triple-double, 30-point a night Russie, you know, and well, yes, it does actually, because if he's able to do that, then the contract's fine. But what I'm saying is, this regressed version of himself doesn't really leave us a whole lot of room for being able to do other things that'll help him be his best at home here in LA. So, you know, the circumstances just suck, and most importantly, Kenny the Jet Smith put it out there that made it so very clear that the Los Angeles Lakers have, you know, first of all, they haven't practiced very much. Let's put that out there. But they also don't have Anthony Davis, who is basically the centerpiece that makes all of this work. So, the number one thing that we need to remember is that when AD comes back, he'll be coming back to a team that practices more than the team that he was on to start the season. And one of the issues we had was a lack of rhythm, lack of imagination in our plays, and a lack of pop in our plays. The team he's coming back to, for better or for worse, we have plays that we run. We have more player movement, more ball movement, all that stuff I used to complain about. We've kind of incorporated a little more of that into our offense. He's coming back to a team with Stanley Johnson on it. You know what I mean? That wasn't a piece we had helping us play defense. He was out there running with lineups starting. What's the guy's name? Our shooter. Either way, we were starting someone who shouldn't have been starting, Wayne Ellington, to start the season. And most of the lineups that AD was in. That made us a very deficient defensive lineup and a very slow defensive lineup with limited mobility because of his lack of dribbling ability. So the worst mistake we were doing, and one of the reasons why we were 500, was not just small ball, but it was more so the lack of defense that we had playing the wing positions to start this season. We got off to a terrible start because of Frank's decisions. And so now that we have Stanley Johnson in place, what AD will have is another guy down there who specializes in defense, will help him kind of mask some of his issues on the perimeter and things like that. He's going to murk it up a bit to help AD on defensive end. So that's a new element that we can look forward to that wasn't there in the past. So when we get that practice time in, hard to do when we're on the road, but when that practice time comes in, we'll see LeBron and AD and Russell Westbrook kind of get used to what it is that they like to do more so. Throughout all the struggles, all the bad stuff, all of that, what we have is data. If nothing else, the Los Angeles Lakers have data. We know what we do more so than we did when we were making those mistakes prior to. And I know LeBron James, he's a learner. He thinks. AD, same thing. Those guys are thinkers at the end of the day. If they're focused, what they're going to do is scheme a way around those mistakes. And I'm hopeful they can find a way to squeeze out some wins while we're trying to figure that out. Because the presence of a play-in tournament, the Lakers should be able to find themselves in a position to, at the very least, get involved in that game. And when you get to that game, anything can happen. So it's a weak Western Conference. I do think the Lakers are going to fire their coach. I'm wondering who they're going to replace him with. If they replace him with the right guy, it's going to be tough to try to get a coach in here mid-season. That's another thing. I know they're not looking forward to that. But we know, you and I know, Lakers don't have a way forward without necessarily doing this. They just have to. At this point, they've let it go too far in terms of the rumors and stuff like that. And they have not come out and said, yo, we're keeping him for the rest of the season. We're dead this nonsense. If they had the full backing of all the if he had the full backing of all the players, you would know it. Because Brown would say enough of these these questions about my coach. He's here, I'm with him, and we're going forward. I've yet to hear Brown say something like that. You know, Carmelo Anthony would have said the same thing. Carmelo kind of alluded to the fact that he wants adjustments made, in my opinion. You know, players like Russell Westbrook, they don't even want to talk to the media because they're not very happy about some of the things that's going on. So, as far as I'm concerned, clearly he's lost the locker room. That's not even worth talking about. He lost the locker room probably week 3, honestly. It was probably over. So, that's why I've been saying it for 2 months. 2 months. We should have been firing this dude 2 months ago, if you ask me. And, you know, it's just when you start realizing things aren't working, you got to salvage things quickly when your timeline is so shrinked, and that's what ours is because we're on everybody's age. You ain't got time. You got to do it now, and that's why I still think of us trying to salvage whatever we can in terms of this season. So, with that being said, I love the Young Bull possibility trade. Although I understand now, if you guys watch my video on that trade, that the Cleveland Cavaliers have no interest in bringing in Russell Westbrook whatsoever. They don't. They want John Wall, so they're hopeful that we can try to flip that around so they can, that's what they want to do. So my thing is, I think the Rockets don't want the package that they have to offer, but we do. It's that kind of thing. So they don't want Russell Westbrook, right? I don't think the Rockets want Russell Westbrook. So this is going to be something where we're going to have to find somebody who actually does want Russell. Now, I've thought about a couple teams, and the only one that really adds up in terms of Russell Westbrook just off top is probably Timberwolves. They may be willing to move on from D'Angelo Russell, and in turn, maybe they'll be willing to take on a Russell Westbrook. That gives them an interesting dynamic with Russell and what's his name? Edwards, and of course Carl Anthony. Two guys can hit the three. Russell's not going to hit the three. He'll be getting them guys the ball and stuff like that. I personally would rather have D'Angelo Russell. At the end of the day, he's a younger player. He's a fantastic expert scorer, but he doesn't kind of provide them the security of a healthy body. He really does go in and out of the lineup a lot for his contract. So maybe they'd be willing to move on, but not toward Russell's contract. And if you make it sweet enough for them, give them something that they can use to win now, which would add in another team of some sort, and I'm sure you could try to maneuver it. But I don't know that the Timberwolves will want that. I don't think they do. So yeah, man, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of amend that and just let you guys know, hey, that Cleveland didn't want that. So, but that doesn't mean that the thing is off the table. It is not. Hopefully they'll actually get that deal done. So yeah, man, big trade on the way, one way or another. We can definitely expect moves to be made. So I'll keep my ear to the streets, and I'll get back to you guys as I do. Yeah, and of course this was initially about Chuck. So for the most part, I agreed. I just think that we got to be very careful about how we articulate who's placing what blame, because I think the Lakers have done a damn good job of covering their tracks in that way to where it doesn't look like they're blaming anybody, even though they're allowing the media to kind of do it for them. So yeah, that's just what it is, man. That's what I see. My name is BDF44. Thank y'all for watching. Out.